and I hope you are well too.
I am well indeed. Yes. And you're back to the press briefing this afternoon, aren't you? Because I think you've had 2 weeks off.
I've delegated it to my deputy for a period of time.
2 weeks away from the crease. All right. So anyway, it's 11 o'clock. So good morning to everybody else as well. And welcome to the first of the board meetings for this calendar year. Now, obviously, we've got a great deal to get through this morning, but I'm confident we will if everyone is great with the tech and brief and to the point, obviously. So we'll make it a swift start. So first of all, apologies for absence. We've got 3 notified: Councillor Sean Davis from Telford and Wrekin, Councillor Seb Lowe from Rugby, and of course Councillor Maria Crompton from Sandwell, although I know Sandwell are represented in another way. There will probably be others, but perhaps rather than shout out on the teams, I could just ask you to send us a quick note through to Tim and we'll make sure we record them in that way. OK, thank you. Number 2 is declarations of interest, where none have been notified. I don't know if there's anything anyone wishes to call out. I'll pause briefly, not seeing any hands, thank you. Number 3 is the chair's remarks, where you'll be pleased to note there are none. That's straightforward. Number 4 is the minutes of the meeting of the 13th of November, which have all been circulated. I will just pause a minute, see if anybody wishes to draw anything out. Not seeing any hands or hearing anything. So we will move on as those being accepted then. In which case, number 5 then is the forward plan, which has also been circulated round. And if I may, there is one item that was just missed off by accident, which is for the March board meeting, which is the WM 2041 5-year plan that should have been included for debate at that board as well. So my apologies for that. And then there we are, not seeing anyone halting me there, in which case number 6 is the financial report for the year to date, and I'll pass over to the Deputy Mayor. So Bob, the floor's yours.
I'm sure you all await with bated breath. So this is the standard monthly finance performance report as at the end of November for the authority. It reports the outcomes of the second detailed full year financial reforecast, and as a result we are now forecasting a surplus on the revenue budget of £900,000 by the year end. This has moved favourably by approximately £3 million from the position previously reported as a result of additional government support for bus service costs, metro and other income losses, along with the continued close control and monitoring of the authority's spending by our office, and I give them credit for what they do. This forecast saving for the year, along with the £2 million reserves previously approved as set aside, will be secured and used in the draft 21-22 budget, subject to a separate report to this meeting. Capital delivery and the investment programme schedules reflect the latest programmes, with an update on the investment programme's funding position being reported to the Mayor and Met leaders later today. Finally, the report contains 2 recommendations in relation to West Midlands Combined Authority guarantee of £2.5 million government funding awarded to WM5G Limited, and approval of the continuation of the joint data team arrangements in support of strategic transport officers regarding the WM5G funding guarantees. The risk associated with this is considered low due to the payments to suppliers being agreed in arrears and subject to delivery. Those elements within the paper are at elements 5, 11 to 11.4, and the GDT arrangements are 12 to 12.4 in the papers. I therefore submit the report for consideration and approval, and with the support of Linda Horn, we're happy to take any questions.
OK, thank you very much. So are there any questions on the financial report thus far? I'm not seeing any hands there either, in which case the board is recommended on page 15, the 4 items that Councillor Slade just read out. I don't intend to repeat them, so I assume that those 4 things are noted and approved. Thank you very much. In which case we go to item number 7, sticking with Councillor Slade, which is the draft budget for 21/22. Bob.
from page 37 to 112 with the appendices for the benefit of members. So this report presents the authority's draft budget for 21-22 financial year, which continues to deliver the WMCA ambition and portfolio activity, but importantly the protection and delivery of all existing local transport policies. A detailed delivery activity is set out in appendices 1 and 2. It recommends cash flat transport levy and member contributions as discussed with leaders, and notes that there will be no mayoral precept during the remainder of the current term of office of the current mayor. The revenue budget requires £3.9 million use of reserves in the year and £1.2 million one-off use of WMCA share and current year business rate income. Reserves will come from the current in-year surplus and through existing resources. Due to the ongoing pandemic, the budget contains a number of significant risks to the authority, specifically in relation to transport provision and the regional recovery as set out in section 11 within the report. A key to this will be the ongoing government support for transport operations, emerging priorities for the region, and any new opportunities from the recently announced government funds and the 3rd of March UK budget, which we expect. Material likelihood of the crystallisation of any of the risks during the next financial year may result in the requirement for an emergency rebudget or diversion of earmarked investment funds to protect the transport delivery. Risks will continue to be closely monitored and accordingly reported. The 21-22 budget approach has been discussed with the authority's external auditor. They are satisfied that this is consistent with their knowledge and understanding of the authority. With the upcoming mayoral election and the uncertainty in relation to the pandemic impact and recovery, they, the auditors, recognise the reasoning behind setting a one-year budget. And as noted in their audit plan, they'll be keeping in the authority's approach to developing a sustainable medium-term financial plan under review. The report presents a balanced budget for next year. However, it is clear from our current financial estimates that we need to continue to look at more sustainable funding solutions in the medium term, including continuing to lobby government for sustainable funding for mayoral combined authorities, a call that the other mayoral combined authorities are also making. Work will begin to refresh these financial estimates early in the new year, including a full review of the WMCA strategic priorities with the mayor and leaders, particularly in light of developing regional strategies in relation to the environment, energy, digital and culture, and pressures arising from the regional recovery work. In the interim, we will continue to support development of these ambitions and plans through flexible applications of resources where possible. In addition, the budget delivers a £1 million efficiency saving through the agreed business transformation programme. And again, I give credit to all staff and all the officers in the council for the work that they've done in bringing that transformation programme to fruition. The authority's capital delivery investment programme is summarised in section 9 and 10 with the detail in appendices 3, 4 and 5. At section 11, report also contains the necessary assurances from the authority's section 151 officer in relation to the robustness of the estimates and adequacy of reserves. A summary of comments from Overview and Scrutiny Committee review of the budget and Mayor's question time are set out in appendices 6, which is at page 109 in the report. The draft budget will now be open for a period of review, and final budget report will be brought to the 12th of December CA board for final approval. I therefore submit the report and recommendations, and again will take questions with the support of Linda Horn, the Finance Director. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Slate. And the first question comes from the Commissioner, David.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mayor. And I'm looking now at page 69 and thereabouts on the safe and security of the network. I apologise a bit here because within this finance report, we are actually looking at some policy in terms of transport. So there does seem a bit of an overlap here, and it may be just straying a little bit from the Deputy Mayor's remit. However, firstly, can I say how much I welcome the target of the reduction in killed and seriously injured on the roads by 40%. That is extremely welcome, and also the ongoing assertion that we should have safe public transport, and of course we work very closely with you on that as well. Be done, particularly on the key route network with the combined authority, police and the fire and rescue services. We need to maintain the flows. We need to of traffic. We need to save lives and injuries, etc. Now, I'll just move on to what is a more financial issue, which is the moving traffic contraventions, and when and how those are going to be devolved from central government, those powers, to local authority areas, as they are in London, of course. And we currently don't have any particular powers over those. The fines that we get from yellow boxes, red routes, misuse of bus lanes, those fines end up with the Treasury, and they don't end up locally here in the West Midlands. And I have noticed that there was a written question was placed in Parliament very recently on this particular matter, and the answer that was given by the Transport Minister was that they were looking at the implementation of Part 6 of the Traffic Management Act 2004, which you remember, Mr. Mayor, I had something to do with many years ago in a different incarnation. So I'm still 15 years on, keeping a keen interest. 15 or 17 years on, I'm keeping a very keen interest in what happens here. But it does look as if there's some movement now from government to actually devolving some of these powers. What I would ask you is, it may be a question for you rather than for the Deputy Mayor, is, what is the intention there? Because at the moment, what the answer says and what the Act of Parliament says is that those powers would be devolved to local authorities. Now, these would be mainly on the key route network. I'm just wondering, have you got some thoughts about your intentions about where those fines, because the fines land locally rather than go to the Treasury. So have you had any thoughts about how you might approach that with the government, and whether they go to individual local authorities or come to the combined authority? I think there's a lot of opportunities here for improving the road system and bringing some much needed money into the enforcement to keep the traffic moving. And of course, the fines, etc., the police will therefore be operating the system of notices to people and to fines, etc. We stand ready to assist. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. I will come back on that, but let me just hear the second question as well, which is from Councillor Lisa Trickett.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Slade. Really just to, I suppose, reflect slightly on some of the concerns from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, particularly around some of the fragility of the budget, and clearly the challenges that COVID has posed in terms of the transport is something that we share. I think members were actually quite concerned, and if it is still the case, that the mayoral election as yet remains unfunded, and government haven't actually committed to secure money for that. I mean, we are some months away from a potential planned election, and if we were to see government's commitment to devolution, one would hope they would actually respect the democratic process. There is a technical issue that we've raised now for a couple of years of scrutiny. There is in terms of incomes, your overall income, you referenced the share of business rates. This is an issue for scrutiny because this is a formula that is being derived that does not necessarily reflect the business rate growth, but is a traditional formula that was used at the point of devolution. And again, what we would ask is that actually this is a further contribution by the metropolitan areas, and that should actually be noticed within the budget, that it is an additional additional part of the contribution. The final point that scrutiny have asked that I raise, and I appreciate the Mayor Act questions reflected on the sort of component parts of things like the skills budget. It is still quite unbelievable to see a budget that has some 100,000 being dedicated to inclusive communities, some £300,000 being placed into supporting the environment, when we know this is an area that there is a lack of capacity and capability across a number of the local authority areas. If we are serious at delivering on inclusive growth and 2041, then our budget, we have a range of resources on employment and innovation from the left, from Innovate UK. One of the things scrutiny would very much like to see is a much more consolidated regional budget that actually sees the totality of the resources going in and understands how that is delivering on the needs and requirements of our community. Because at the moment, if you were to look just at the columns, actually this budget does not reflect the needs and requirements and the priorities that have been set out in terms of inclusive growth and zero carbon future. Thank you.
Thank you. So are there any other hands? I'm not seeing any other contributors. So let me ask, let me just respond to the Commissioner's question, then I'll leave the Deputy Mayor to respond to Councillor Trickett and put the proposal. So like the Commissioner, I too have seen the sort of signs of movement from government over this. We've had 2 pushbacks just in my time as Mayor, and I suspect before, about having the same rights as London for this area. So we do want to move into that gap that the government have shown. And our proposal, I hope, would be that's done in absolute unison across the combined authority area rather than in 7 different ways. But that would need to come to this board for agreement. But we do, I'm sure everyone would agree, there is an opportunity for us to take advantage of what now looks like a softening of the government's position. So I hope that makes sense, and we will bring that forward. And I know I won't ask Laura to contribute, but I know Laura is already doing the legwork on what this needs to look like. But Councillor Slade, do you want to respond to Councillor Trickett as well?
Yes, a couple of points. So I think we acknowledge that the business rate growth formula that was agreed in the devolution deal is not the one that we actually utilise, and that, of course, has been subject to discussion with the local authorities. But we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the leaders did actually agree to enter into 100% business rate pilot with government within the West Midlands, and I think that has made quite a difference to each of the local authorities within the West Midlands. So I think we shouldn't diminish the impact that actually has had from a local authority perspective. Councillor Trickett's right. Up to this point in time, we haven't actually secured any arrangement with government with regard to funding the mayoral elections, and I take the point that she makes with regard to commitment to democracy. However, I wish to give an assurance that we continue to lobby governments along with the other mayoral combined authorities across the country to secure that funding. And there have been some recent developments with regard to those matters, which I think the finance director needs to discuss with the other finance directors within the region, and that's hopefully will be resolved. If it doesn't happen through government support in that regard, then we do look within our own internal resources to see how we can fund the mayoral elections going forward. So, notwithstanding what Councillor Trickett says, we are making some progress in trying to work out how those matters can be dealt with. With regard to the 2 other points that she makes, I would acknowledge that those are both very important areas within the combined authorities' ambitions and delivery requirements. And again, within the year, we hope to bring forward some proposals to deal with both how we deliver the 10 priorities in 2041, which is absolutely critical to us going forward. And I know that Ed Cox and his team are working on some of those priorities, and we need to therefore identify how we can support those. And equally, Ed Cox again, and the issue of inclusive growth is being actively considered as we speak. The budget does contain risk, as I think every other local authority budget will contain risk at this point. The point was made that our auditors are satisfied, in light of the COVID situation, that a one-year budget is the most prudent budget to actually deliver at this point in time. But as it says within my report, we will be monitoring very closely the ongoing situation in 21-22, and we will report back to the board if we do have to reposition the budget during that period. So hopefully that gives an assurance. We welcomed, I think, the comments that were made by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I have read those and I think they are valuable. I think it's important the Overview and Scrutiny Committee does contribute to the development of the budget, but obviously we are in a difficult situation with regard to COVID at this point in time. So I think it is prudent to support the budget that we've currently placed before you, and the recommendations that are contained within the report I therefore put to you.
Thank you very much. In which case, the recommendations are, as you said, on page 37 and 38. I'm not going to read them out, but there are 10 points there. And obviously, the key point is we will now work this up through the consultation, and then it will come back to the February board for sign off. So not seeing any hands, so I presume colleagues are comfortable with that course of action. Thank you very much. In which case, number 8 on the agenda is the Black Country Land and Property Investment Fund. The update and the reprofile approval. First of all, again, in the name of Councillor Slay.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report is at page 113 within your papers, and it's updates and reprofile approval that's required. The report updates the board on the progress delivered to date against the 53.04 million BLPDF funds delegated, assured and monitored by the Black Country Local Enterprise Partnership. The programme is delivering a mixture of commercial, residential and skills projects as set out in the report, with 3 of the 9 approved projects already complete and a £900 million estimated GVA uplift of the total programme. The programme was originally approved to be delivered by March 2021. However, some delays have been experienced due to the complexity of the projects and from the current COVID pandemic situation that we find ourselves in, a constant theme, I'm afraid, through some of these reports. As a result, the report seeks to gain approval to reprofile expenditure and outputs to be claimed to March 2025, with associated programme monitoring costs to March 2026. In essence, that's the recommendation we're asking the board to approve within the papers. I therefore put accordingly, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. And I do know that Sarah Middleton is on the call and ready and waiting for any questions. So let me see if there are any debates about this, if anyone wants to indicate. Otherwise, you might get off free, Sarah. Nobody coming in? No, in which case, I won't delay us then, in which case I think the recommendations, as Councillor Slay said, are on page 113 and 4, recommended to note and recommended to approve, and particularly the reprofiling. Do I have any dissent over that, or I will proceed if not? OK, thank you very much. That is then agreed. In which case now then, this bit might test the technology. We come to item 9, which is the West Midlands digital roadmap. Now, Councillor Harley sent me up, well, you all saw it in the chat, saying he was trying to do 2 things at once. So I hope Councillor Harley, as if by magic, is going to come back on the line for this. If not, I will, Ed, you don't know this, I'm going to ask you to present this paper. So let me see, is Councillor Harley there?
It's necessary.
Ed, if not, I'm going to ask you to jump in then, please. Yep.
No problem at all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. I am presenting you the digital roadmap this morning for your approval. As we know, the West Midlands has got some significant strengths in digital. We've got some of the, well, we have got the UK's best 5G coverage, and we're national leaders when it comes to digital innovation in things like transport, policing and health. We're also home to many excellent digital firms like Gymshark, but I think COVID has made clear that there is a lot more that we need to do to make sure that everybody can realise the benefits of the digital economy and society. There are too many families that are digitally excluded, either by lack of devices or unaffordable data or through poor connectivity. And also we know that too many firms are struggling to adopt digital technologies, and there are too few digital startups that achieve the rapid growth that they need to compete internationally. And so what we've done over the past 6 months or so is to work very collaboratively both with local authorities and with the private sector and a number of other agencies in order to pull together the digital roadmap that we're presenting today. We've worked with the LEPs, universities, third sector and other partners as well, as we've tried to pull this together. It's not a comprehensive strategy and it's not an action plan, just to be clear, but it sets the direction for how partners can work together across 5 digital missions. And so these 5 missions are, first of all, to secure access for everybody to digital opportunities, particularly those in poverty. Secondly, to share and use data to improve people's lives. Thirdly, so that's very much about data sharing and how we store data in the region. Thirdly, to become the UK's best connected region, both in terms of broadband, but also 4G and of course 5G as well. Fourthly, to realise the potential of digital to transform our economy and to build economic resilience. And then finally, to use digital public services to build the fairer, greener, healthier region that we all want to see. And there's some particular developments that we could make there around digital public services. So work on all of these missions has already started. We have, for example, the first meeting of the West Midlands Coalition for Digital Inclusion coming up next week. And the mission on the digital economy is going to be launched at the West Midlands Venture Fest very soon as well. The coordination of activity around the roadmap will be led by a digital roadmap steering group, which is going to meet regularly in order to keep up momentum on these missions. And so I'm very simply asking the board to agree the digital roadmap this morning and commit to collaborating with us as we drive forward each of those 5 missions.
Okay, thank you, Ed. And I think you'd prepared it. So that's great. So let me see if there's anybody who wants to respond to this in either a supportive or a challenging way. So anybody want to respond? No. OK, I'm slightly surprised. I thought this would generate debate. So in which case, Ed, we take that as agreed the roadmap and committing to collaboration on the 5 missions outlined, as it said on page 121 of the board pack. Which case next then we go to item number 10, which is the Young Combined Authority Vision and Priorities. And to introduce this, I'm going to pass to Councillor Bridget Jones. Bridget.
Thank you very much and hi everybody. So I'm the warm-up act today for Ayan Aidan and Kashmir Hawker, who will be talking in a moment as representatives of the Young Combined Authority, and they're going to present their vision and priorities to the board. As you'll all remember, we established collectively the Young Combined Authority 2 years ago now to provide insight and challenge from young people to what we do as a combined authority. And the YCA brings together a diverse group of young people aged 16 to 25 from across the geography of the West Midlands, and they all live, learn or work here. I've joined in some of the recent YCA meetings, and I know that the members are, of course, very concerned about the impacts of COVID-19, and that has helped to shape their proposals or asks that they've got here today. This was originally scheduled to come a year ago, last March, to the board, but because of the pandemic, had to be put off. And what you have here today has obviously been shaped by that impact on young people. And they've got this vision that they're about to set out a vision for you with a set of priorities and asks. Some of those do go beyond the direct remit and influence for CA, but the YCA felt it was right to set out that vision for their generation, not just for the CA, but for the whole region it covers. There's 2 asks in the cover note. One is to note and endorse the development of the Young Combined Authority Board's vision and priorities document. And the second is to reflect on where proposals can inform WMCA policy, delivery and future DEVO asks. So with your permission, Chair, it would be great to give some time over to AN and Kashmir today to present what they have been working on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Councillor Jones, for your introduction and those kind words. Can I, first of all, and particularly within these coming 12 months, and on behalf of all of us at the YCA, wish everybody at the Combined Authority and across local government the healthiest and safest possible of 2021. As the 2019-20 NUS President Zamzam Ibrahim once said, and I quote, "We spent the last decade fighting against things. It's time to fight for something." That, Councillor Jones, Mr Mayor and colleagues, is exactly what we are here to do. The Young Combined Authority's diversity, breadth of experience and capacity of wanting to help create that better world generally puts us in a strong position and makes us all feel proud to be sharing our vision and priorities document with you today. Through the Combined Authority and Beat Freaks, and apologies for one of my dogs barking downstairs, through the Combined Authority and Beat Freaks, we were created in September 2019 to inform you, our elected leaders of the region, of young people's concerns, aspirations, and is the major reason why we've created this document in helping within that mission to building a better West Midlands. It certainly comes at a critical time, known way in which COVID-19 has challenged every aspect of life, but also I think gives us a perfect chance of laying out how we can rebuild from the pandemic, as well as critically getting our ambitions out there prior to this year's mayoral election, and therefore ensuring that our asks, young people's asks, are on the agenda within what's going to be a very interesting campaign. As stated across the paper, 7 key areas have been identified, which we see as crucial for creating a good recovery post-pandemic and enabling, therefore, greater opportunity, quality of life and accessibility for our young people via culture, digital, skills, environment, transport, housing and regeneration, and inclusive communities and well-being. And Councillor Jones, knowing that this week has seen the first cohort of young and vibrant apprentices beginning at Birmingham 2022, that being 12 of us, of which through linking the apprenticeship to my role at the OC, proudly includes myself, certainly again confirms that in using Wolverhampton's fine motto, out of darkness cometh the light. To state some more detail, I'll yield my time to my excellent colleague, Birmingham member of the YCA, Ian Aidan.
Thank you very much. I must start by giving thanks to Councillor Bridget-Jones for such an introduction, and my fellow esteemed young board member Kashmir for such a powerful introduction to what is a powerful vision. I must also thank all the board members and all members present here across local government, and also pray that you and your loved ones are doing well during these tough times. Tough times that have called for tough decisions, tough choices and tough sacrifices that do not go unnoticed as we sit here today and have the ability to impact the lives of thousands. And thus we collectively as a board have spent much time, thought and deliberation into refining 5 key points in each of our 7 portfolio areas. Some of our asks may require the board to work with organisations to lobby the national government for devolved power deals. Some of our asks fall directly within your remits as a board, and some may fall outside of it. For those that fall outside of the remit, we implore the board to ask themselves how it may be able to use its influence, correspond and liaise with other stakeholders to mould our collective vision for the West Midlands together. 5 asks in each portfolio area. 5 asks small enough to make a massive change, for it is small steps that lead to a bigger collective change. And change not for ourselves, folks, but change that is reflective of the younger generation and their aspirations. It is also imperative that I state that this is not a directive nor a roadmap, but a vision for all of us. And whilst we expect our vision to be taken seriously by leaders and change makers, we as a young board are keen to work collectively to turn our vision into reality. The young board is looking to publish this document and also use it as the basis of engagement for the West Midlands Combined Authority and all other partners moving forward. That being said, we therefore ask that you endeavour to familiarise yourself with this document so that we may be able to build together, not for ourselves, but the constituents that will inherit a more inclusive, a greener, a stronger and more powerful West Midlands. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you, both of you, for your powerful words and actually your brevity as well. So that's brilliant. OK, to be powerful and brief is a great skill. So wonderful. Right, we've got a couple of hands up. First of all, to Ian Courts. Ian.
Thank you very much, Chairman. We were joined at my environmental and energy meeting by Lilies from the YCA, and she made a great contribution then. And I just want to thank the YCA for their contribution to my stream of activity. Clearly, it's one that's, you know, really relevant to young people. It's you know, it's one of our most important, and I thank you for the time that you spent attending and contributing to our activity. It's been really it's really important. I mean, you know, it's a whole range of things. It's sort of low carbon. It's looking at careers in the green sector. You know, the green pledge that you're asking for, biodiversity. All of these things, you know, are massively important to us.
Perfect. Great to hear that. And then the second hand I see is Councillor Hartley. Kath.
Here I am. Yes, I'm referring to page 167, the section in the draft plan for transport, and I'd just like to draw people's attention to the fact that the factors, the bullet points within that section reflect fully the outcome of national surveys and local knowledge about the causes of dissatisfaction on the public transport network, particularly buses, in the under 25 age group, and serve as a deterrent for those who do not yet use public transport. And just to stress how important it is that this age group, that we start getting the under 25, so in children younger than that, onto public transport, so that they develop a lifetime habit of trust and usage of our network. Thank you.
Thank you. So are there any other hands coming up for this? Any other responses? I'm not seeing any yet, but so can I pass back to Councillor Jones then, if you want to respond to what you've heard?
Thank you. So what we have here is a range of really well thought out policy asks. As has been said, some of these are in the direct remit of the CA. Some of them are things we can influence. Some of these are things we need to ask government for more powers or money for if we're going to implement them. What I would ask all the individual portfolio holders to do is to look at what reflects your portfolio in this document. Look at the asks of your portfolio area and to engage with the YCA on looking at how we might take some of these pledges forward. Or potentially lobby for the powers and the money to take some of them forward where that is not currently within our remit. So on behalf of the CA, that's my ask out to everybody else. So really well thought through document, and I look forward to hearing how you've all been engaging with it going forward. And a massive thank you to AN and to Kashmir for representing the YCA today, and to everyone who has put so much work into this over not just the last year, but the time before that as well. COVID has turned this into a long process and a lot of work has gone into it. Your voice has been heard today, and hopefully we shall get some action out of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Nothing I need to add to what Councillor Jones has said. That's first class. Thank you both. OK, in which case we next go on to item 11, which is the Recovery Coordination Group Community Recovery Roadmap and Prospectus. And I don't know what you've done to your councillors today, Ed, because Maria is also not here. So you're going to talk to this paper, which, of course, we have seen a number of times before at different meetings.
Yes, very simply, Mr. Mayor, what I want to do today is to remind colleagues that the Community Recovery Roadmap and Prospectus was already endorsed by the Recovery Forum back in November, but it was felt that it needed formal approval today from the Combined Authority Board itself. I just want to thank local authority partners for their ongoing engagement and support as we're now beginning to move forward some of the themes and priorities that are in the roadmap. And to flag the fact that we are now discussing a number of the community recovery asks with government officials so that we can move forward those in the hope perhaps of funding at the next budget. So the last thing to say is that we're planning to launch the Community Recovery Innovation Challenge at the beginning of February now, given that the crisis is still unfolding. So we've pushed that back a month, but we look to be launching that at the beginning of February, if that then seems right. So that's all I need to say, I think, in relation to this report.
And I think page 169 has the recommendations reconfirming the endorsement. So I suspect that will be non-controversial. So that looks good. I'm not seeing any hands, so that's great. In which case, We then move on to I don't know what the collective word is, a slug of transport proposals, which Councillor Ward will present. The first one is New Stations Package 1. So, Councillor Ward, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Andy. As you say, yeah, there's a number of reports for us to play through here. First one, New Stations Package 1. What we're asked to do here is authorise the full business case for this package at a total budget of some £55.84 million. It will deliver 2 stations with the associated train services for entry into service in March of 2023. The project currently has 9.99 million approved and committed to date, and this paper seeks a further 6 million from the CA infrastructure programme, which is subject to receipt of some £39.65 million from DFT. So this project, as you can clearly see, is not going anywhere unless we get DFT agreement to this. West Midlands Rail Executive and TfWM are leading on this project. It will deliver, as I've said, 2 new railway stations, one at Willenhall and the other at Darlaston, and they'll be served by a new train service linking the stations with Wolverhampton, Walsall and Birmingham. The proposal is that each of the stations will be fully accessible and include unstaffed ticketing and help facilities, pick-up and drop-off points, car and cycle parking. It will, of course, substantially improve access from Willenhall and Darlaston areas to Birmingham, Walsall and Wolverhampton, and it forms part of the overarching HS2 growth strategy with providing connectivity to the national rail network, including HS2, once that becomes operational from Curzon Street. What is proposed is 1 new service an hour between Walsall and Wolverhampton and 1 service between Wolverhampton and Birmingham. And the construction of these new stations will create around 120 jobs and remediate 1.4 hectares of brownfield land. Now, this particular package has a very, very strong benefit cost ratio of 6.5, so it represents extremely good value for money for the taxpayer. And even after you take into account the DFT COVID-19 long-term impact, it still has a BCR of some 4.7. So it's very good value for money, as I've been saying. Progress that's been made since the outline business case was agreed is set out in section 4 of the report. And the funding package for the scheme is in paragraph 5.5. You can see there the table sets out where the funding comes from, and again flags up this considerable sum of money from DFT. As I mentioned earlier, the £6 million of funding requested from the CA that's the subject of this report is also subject to securing that DFT funding. And the DFT have considered a presentation at their programme board on the 7th of January, so that was just last week. There is one further hurdle that we have to get over with DFT, and that will happen next month in February. The one slight thing I'd say about this, and it applies to the next report as well, is it's a little disappointing that with DFT this has got right down to the wire to January and February, when we really need this funding secured in the first quarter of this year so that we can get on and deliver this scheme. I would commend the recommendations to the board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. So any hands on this one? Ooh, I was certain there would be. OK, no, in which case then I'm not going to read out the recommendations that Ian's just referred to, but page 173 is very clear, 173, 174 with all the recommendations. And obviously it is subject, as Ian said, to the DFT confirming their funding. So I presume that is then agreed. Lovely. I'm not seeing any debate there, in which case back to you for item 13, package 2.
Thank you. This is a very, very similar report, but different railway stations. So again, we're asked to authorise full business case for package 2, which are stations on the Camp Hill line in Birmingham. This is a total project budget of £61.4 million, which will deliver the 3 stations with the associated rail services, again, for entry into service in 2023. The project has 7.35 million approved and committed to date, and this paper seeks a further 9 million from the CA infrastructure programme, which again is subject to the receipt of the balance of funding, and I'll come back to that a little later. The 3 new railway stations are at Moseley, Kings Heath and Hazelwell, all within Birmingham, and they would be served by 2 trains an hour between Birmingham New Street Station and Kings Norton. This project will substantially improve access to commercial, employment and education opportunities in central Birmingham, and the construction of these stations would directly create something in the region of 130 jobs during construction and 16 jobs over the longer term. Again, this has a very positive cost benefit ratio of 2.4, so again represents very good money, value for money for the taxpayer. Again, the progress since the outline business case was agreed is set out in section 4 of the report, and paragraph 5.4 lists out the funding package for the scheme, and you'll see again we are reliant upon Department for Transport here for some £19.35 million. Birmingham City Council, I'm pleased to announce, have committed to £5.22 million from the Clean Air Zone, although I will come back to that on the report that's on the private agenda, because there are 1 or 2 issues around that we all need to be aware of. Again, the £9 million of funding from the CA is subject to approval of DFT funding. Again, DFT considered this. Their meeting last week on the 7th, and there is the same final hurdle to be got over with DFT next month. Again, I'd commend the recommendations to the board.
Thank you. Very clear. And there are, well, there were 2, but one's just gone down. But one hand is Kath Hartley. Kath.
I'm here now. Yes, we do have some concerns about the sourcing of funding, given that there's already a over £20 million gap, even if the other requests were fulfilled. But I've been asked to draw to your attention the need to put rather more into Kings Norton Station to bring it up to spec. And beyond this report, to look at turning the loop, if you like, into a lasso. And that is linking up with Longbridge Station, where there is a turning facility for trains. And that would bring in Northfield. And that would create a very fine lasso-shaped set of options for commuters and shoppers and people travelling for leisure purposes, thus meeting our clean air requirements and congestion policies.
Thank you. Okay, and then the second hand has come back up, so that's Councillor Lisa Trickett. Lisa?
I assume that given one of the stations is in my ward, I'd probably have a little bit of vested interest in this beyond being Chair of Overview and Scrutiny. I think what I was going to reflect, and again, it's an ongoing concern about how the Combined Authority does its business. And it's been raised certainly at mayoral policy questions. And again, I reflected on it at the budget questions that, as Councillor Hartley has said, there is still a massive hole in the budget for this proposal. And what we are also still seeking to see is that full, robust business plan from the West Midlands Rail Executive. We're also seeking to see the timetable. And where I have a real concern here is that we have announcements, we have films produced of how great these stations could be. My community residents get excited that there is something going to happen. And time again, what we're actually finding is the reality is very, very different to the announcement. And again, all I'm asking for is clear transparency, clear accountability, that where there is the need still for a significant amount of work to be done, we are clear that our announcements reflect that fact.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to pass to Councillor Ward, but he may wish to pass it to anybody else or indeed ask me to comment on it. But Councillor Ward, first of all.
Thank you very much. Let me deal with the easier bit of that. The questions that Councillor Hartley asked, or the requests that she put in around Kings Norton and then Longbridge. We'll take those away. I mean, the current full business case that we're looking to prepare here does not include Longbridge, but we'll certainly take away the issues around Kings Norton. Perhaps Councillor Hartley could give me a little more detail on that, and we'll see what the art of the possible might be. But of course, we are limited by the amount of budget that's going to be available for this scheme. And as has been pointed out by Councillor Trickett, we do have to secure the money from DFT if we're to go ahead with indeed this package or indeed the previous one that we agreed. To come on to Councillor Trickett's comments, I can well understand why people would be getting excited out in Moseley, Kings Heath and indeed Hazelwell about the proposals here to reopen this railway line. I do know it has been a demand of the communities in these areas for a number of years. I don't think we've been anything other than transparent around the ask that is required of the Department of Transport, and indeed the Combined Authority has brought forward an outline business case through this board, and we're now at the full business case stage. So we are being transparent in all of this, as transparent as we can be, and indeed the report does point out that the services will not be online until the fourth quarter of 2023. So if people out in Moseley, Kings Heath and Hazelwell are getting excited, they do need to bear in mind that we are transparently telling them there will not be a service until quarter four of 2023. Where I do share some concerns with Councillor Trickett was the comment I made earlier on the previous package that it's a little bit disappointed. I know that DFT have been in correspondence with the Mayor for some time about both these packages. It's a little bit disappointed that we've gotten so close to the wire in this before getting the agreement of DFT, and we indeed are still waiting for a further month before we get across that final hurdle with DFT. I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Andy, and just come back to the recommendations, which I would urge the board to agree.
That's great. So the recommendations are on page 187 and 188. Let me just see. I will take silence as consent. And that's what we have. So that is also agreed. Thank you. In which case, number 14, Ian, back to you, Perry Barr.
Thank you. Again, this is to authorise full business case. In this instance, for the Perry Barr Transport interchange, this has got an estimated cost that unfortunately has increased, but it's now estimated to be just over £30 million. And the funding that has been secured for the scheme thus far leaves us with a shortfall of some £9.5 million, which was subject to the discussion by Met leaders at our meeting on Wednesday of this week. And we are very much hoping we will have a solution to that funding gap later on today. But we will see where we get to in the meeting that's this afternoon. But anyway, this scheme seeks to upgrade the Perry Barr railway station and Perry Barr bus interchange, which will accommodate the rising capacity forecasts and improve accessibility and also improve the quality of the environment at this particular location. It will bring major investment and improve public transport opportunities to the communities that are served in this particular area, and it will enhance the quality of rail access to key leisure and employment centres, as well as supporting the Commonwealth Games, because this is both these schemes, or the overall scheme, which includes two elements, is vital for the successful delivery of the Commonwealth Games in 2022. The railway station scheme will incorporate a new station building, lifts down to the station platforms, a new booking office and station concourse. And similarly, the bus interchange scheme proposes an improved bus interchange, including new shelters and a stop for the new Sprint Rapid Transit service. Delivery programme for both the railway station and the interchange is challenging because both projects, as I've been saying, are critical for the Commonwealth Games. The railway station also has a planned temporary cessation of passenger services from March of this year through to March 2022 to allow for construction, and it is essential that the project awards its stage 2 construction contract, which it cannot do without the full business case approval this morning. And the bus interchange project requires integration with the wider BCC-led works that are taking place in the wider area. As I said, the project costs have unfortunately risen. The original outline business case estimated just over 20 million, and we now find ourselves in the territory of just over 30 million. So the report seeks to obtain approval for the revised scheme, This revised scheme is also going to be considered by Birmingham City Council's Planning Committee on the 21st of January. The cost benefit ratio for this project is just over 2.1. So again, represents very good value for money for the taxpayer. And then if you turn to paragraph 3.7, you will see the funding set out in the table in that paragraph, which flags up this £9.5 million funding gap that we have. So that funding gap, or let me start again. No contracts will be let until that funding gap is closed off, which is why we had a conversation about this earlier this week as MEP leaders. And I'm hopeful that we will be able to fund that off and allow these contracts to be let following our meeting this afternoon, because as I've said, I think this will be the third time now, this scheme is essential for the delivery, or the successful delivery, of the Commonwealth Games in 2022. Thank you. Again, I commend the recommendations.
Thank you very much. And the hand that's gone up is Mike Bird. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As people know, I'm always the person that says what other people don't want to say, and I'm not going to change my position on this either. I am concerned, Mr. Mayor, and I've said this on a couple of occasions now, where do we go if the Commonwealth Games doesn't go ahead? I mean, at the moment, it's just around the corner. It seems a long way away, but that's the first point. And the second point is a general point in relation to transport schemes. Whenever we have a transport scheme, it's overrun by a substantial amount of money. We saw this at the Queen Elizabeth Station or University Station. I think that was about 10 million. We were talking about this at Coventry on Monday. That was 10 million. Here we have another 10 million, seems to be a common figure. We pick out the transport schemes, but this is 30% more. And I have to say to myself, are we actually putting figures forward to enable us to be complacent in agreeing the scheme and then trying to find the money afterwards? It worries me greatly because there are many examples on all transport schemes, as I've just mentioned 3, and I'm sure we can find more. But my real worry is whether we need to have some kind of contingency plan if the inevitable were to happen and the Commonwealth Games were to be cancelled. I could see the situation in perhaps not too near future, but perhaps not too distant either, where we get COVID-free in the UK because of the efforts that everybody's putting in to make sure that happens as quickly as possible. And then do we then turn around to say we'll welcome all of the people from the Commonwealth who may or may not be in the same position as us in relation to COVID to fund the Commonwealth Games? Yes, there's a lot of money being invested into that. And at this point in time, that runs into many, many millions of pounds. But I think we need to have some debate in the very near future as to where government might be in relation to early thinking on this particular thorny subject.
Thank you, Mike. Any other contributions? No, in which case I'm going to ask Ian, Izzy wants to come in as well. Izzy.
Andy, I just wanted to pick up on that point, which, and give our own experience in Warwickshire. There is an issue, I think, particularly with railway, with schemes that there is a culture which is a problem, I think, around the bidding, the initial proposals that come together. And, I'm really reflecting more generally rather than about this specific scheme. But there is a general problem, I believe. I came across it when I was doing Bob's job on the investment board. I've seen it in our own authority, and I would lay a pound to a penny that every one of us as leaders have had the same issue with major contracts that continually uplift. They come in at a price and then they incrementally grow. And it seems to be that the marketplace finds this is the way to go about bidding. And it isn't satisfactory when we are looking at, funding that's tight, and we're looking at projects that we are very keen on, prioritise and expect to deliver. And then we find 3/4 of the way down the line, we're in this position. I've certainly found it with Network Rail in particular, but it is not down to them alone. And I do wish, we tried to address it at the time, but it just is such a difficult thing to try to change the culture. And I think there's a fundamental problem here, Andy.
Thank you. So I'll ask Ian to respond, but obviously I am more than happy that we take this away and consider this in a more reflective way rather than just in this meeting. But Ian, to you first. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm happy with what you've just said, I think, Andy, providing we do agree the recommendations.
Yes, sorry, because
that's going to create a huge problem if we don't. Let me try and pick up the issue, first of all, that both Mike and Izzy have raised around costs. One of the elements here in this increase in costs is that this proposal now includes the cost of the interchange. So that accounts for some £3.26 million of the increase. There's obviously been the impact of COVID, and we know that has had an impact on construction schemes, not just in this country, but around the world, and it's led to some increases in costs. There's also, in the case of the railway station, I don't know if members of the board can recall the original images for the railway station that were printed in the Birmingham Mail, may well have received coverage elsewhere indeed, and they were somewhat uninspiring. So officers from Birmingham City Planning Department have been speaking to officers of the CA, getting a little bit more ambition into the designs for the railway station in order that we get a better overall design. And there's also been some tweaks to what was considered in the original scope for the railway station. That's led to increased costs as well. So I don't think it's all as bad as may have been painted about. This is a general theme for transport schemes that they overrun their costs. I think there are some very real issues within this scheme that has led to the increase of cost. Let me then pick up Mike's comments around the Commonwealth Games. I'm going to work on the assumption Mike is going to enjoy the Commonwealth Games as much as anybody else across the West Midlands. Indeed, I'm going to make a point of inviting him to a number of events. We are all working on the assumption at the moment that the Commonwealth Games are going to go ahead in spite of what is happening around the world with the pandemic. Indeed, let's recall that the Games are to be delivered in July of 2022. That's when the opening ceremony will take place. The vaccine should well and truly have been rolled out around this country by then, so we should all be vaccinated and be able to go about a more normal existence than we are at the time. But in terms of this specific scheme, even if the Games were not to go ahead, this has a very strong legacy element for Birmingham and the wider region. Indeed, the bus routes that go up this particular corridor go on into the Black Country, and there will be benefits for all of us from these improvements when they're put in place. But also, as well, please do remember that we are, through the Commonwealth Games, delivering a number of legacies that the whole region will benefit from. In Sandwell, the Aquatic Centre, currently under construction, we want to get that completed. Needs to be completed in time for the Games, but again, a strong legacy from hosting the Games here in Birmingham. The Bowls Centre, the National Bowls Centre down in Leamington, that will be enhanced as a result of us hosting the Commonwealth Games, with better facilities being part of the legacy for that particular facility. And out in Staffordshire, with the mountain biking event, there'll be a legacy facility left behind there as a result of us hosting the Commonwealth Games. So these things, whatever happens, and we can't be certain what is going to happen going forward. Indeed, the Olympic Games that were postponed to the summer of this year are now looking in some doubt again. So we can't be certain. Who knows what will happen next? There may be another variant to the virus, and we are all placed back to square one. But I'm going to take an optimistic view and optimistically look to the future and the hosting of the Commonwealth Games as a benefit, not just for Birmingham, for the whole of the region. But this scheme in particular will have a legacy for Birmingham, the Black Country, and the people that live in those areas. And I absolutely believe we should be endorsing this report today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, you want to come back?
Yes, if I may, Mr. Mayor. I would agree with Ian wholeheartedly. I know Pettybar Station. I lived in Pettybar for a number of years, so it's probably one of the worst stations you could go to in the whole of the transport network. And that's the first point. So I'm not disagreeing with Ian on that. I'm just flagging up the point that July is not so far away. And I'll just pick up on something that Ian said. Yes, by by the end of this year, if not sooner, the whole of this country will have been vaccinated. I dwell on those two words, this country. The people coming from the Commonwealth are not from this country. They'll be coming into this country. And as a result, I don't know what the rollout of the vaccine might be across the Commonwealth. My geography has never been very good, and I'd have to spend half an hour listing the countries that are in the Commonwealth, if I was being brutally honest. But I think that, you know, yes, I see the legacy. I don't have a problem with that. But what I do worry about, quite genuinely going forward, is we need, as a combined authority, to have a contingency plan if some of these schemes, which have been bought in by business, bear in mind, business have bought into this and they've actually pledged money to it. If they see this is not going to happen or get cancelled or delayed, whatever, those businesses will rightly, I believe, review their budget allocation and say, hang on a minute. And all of the partners that are involved in funding all of the schemes that we just mentioned might just pretty well get cold feet. Ian knows with my self-like figure, it won't be the 100 yards or the 200 metres. I'm old money. It won't be the 200 metres that I'll be doing. It's normally the same event that I have every week, and that's jumping hurdles. So I have to say that I'm pretty good at that. So if there's any event that I've been invited to be in, make sure it's the hurdles or the triathlon, or in some cases, in my view, the marathon. After 41 years of doing this, I think I've completed a few. But I just want to lay on, you know, a genuine point. I come back to the main point of the argument that every transport scheme, and this is just confirmed, mainly Network Rail. We had this on Monday where Network Rail, in my view, had not been, well, they've been disingenuous in relation to the Coventry scheme, and as a result, we've got to hold their feet to the fire. I had this conversation when we talked about University Station, and I made the point that one of the main beneficiaries of that were the NHS and indeed the university themselves, along with Network Rail. And I made the point then we should go back and tell them they should dig into their pockets a little deeper. That didn't happen, as much as I think their pockets were sewn up. But at the end of the day, again, that is a great benefit to the people who are visiting the QE. I follow all that, but I'm afraid everybody has to pay their part. And I don't think Network Rail are being as honest and open with us from the benefits that they themselves will receive.
Okay, so I'm going to turn to the recommendations. I am going to ask Laura, though, to hear what has been said and to just reflect, perhaps with Ian and myself, as to how we can respond to that. But Ian, I was going to come to the recommendations, but you want to say something else first?
Yes, I do want to say something else, because I certainly don't want to enter or get involved in the argument between Mike and Network Rail. I'm going to leave that to him. I just want to point out a couple of things. First of all, I'm often critical of the government, but I have to say here, when it comes to the Commonwealth Games, the government have agreed with me that were we to have further problems down the track, and it unfortunately becomes impossible to host the Games, which I do not believe that's where we're going to end up, but the government have agreed that we should secure the legacy from the Games, and this is very much one of the legacies that we want to secure. I'd also just like to flag up paragraph 3.10 in the report, because there have already been some sunk costs to date on this scheme, which ironically add up to 9.4 million, and it's doubtful whether those sunk costs would be recovered if we don't take this scheme forward. So it doesn't really, notwithstanding the issues around inflation and costs getting inflated and all of the arguments around that, there is a very sensible reason why we would want to proceed with this particular report. Happy for you to now go to the
Thank you. Okay, so the recommendations are on page 201, and it's been made very clear that this can't proceed without the funding gap being closed, but subject to that, do I have support for that? And I'm not seeing any further hands, so that is good. Thank you. In which case, we're running tight on time, so the next items I hope we can be a little faster through. So item 15, the Metro buy before boarding. Ian.
Thank you. We're asked to note this report. It's telling us the progress that's been made on delivering Midland Metro buy before boarding. So just to remind everyone, we previously agreed that what we tried to achieve would be a totally cashless solution for Midlands Metro, so that you would be able to get on the vehicle and either tap your bank card in and out to travel, or use a Swift card or use a mobile ticketing app, which would allow you to do the same thing, and your travel would be cashless. That scheme had an estimated cost of £1.7 million. However, since then, some further work has been done through an equality assessment to pick up the number of people in the country who do not have a bank account. And you'll see from paragraph 4.3, there are estimated to be 1.3 million people in the UK without a bank account. That translates to roughly 150,000 adults in the West Midlands, and they may well find a cashless system difficult. So the solution's been revisited. It's now proposed to provide 2 ticket vending machines at each of the 20 tram stops, which would accept cash and therefore allow those individuals who can't operate a cashless system to still ride on the metro. There are some increased costs as a result of that, which is in section 6 of the report. So the 1.7 million I mentioned earlier is now moved up to 4.5 million, but I would point out that there will be net annual operation savings of around £2 million a year. Recommend the report. Thank you.
So there is page 209, a noting and an approving. Are there any hands on this? No. OK, so that is agreed. And we come to 16. Back to you, Midland Metro bylaws.
Thank you. This is to inform the board of proposals to make changes to the bylaws. Having agreed the buy before you board ticketing system, there is a loophole in the bylaws in that the buy before you board scheme will mean that people could alight the vehicle and then claim that they have left their ticket on board the vehicle, and we wouldn't be able to then take measures to deal with that. So you'll see in section 3 of this report, it is proposed to close that loophole by insisting that any person identified as having travelled upon a vehicle and subsequently leaves the vehicle must retain their valid ticket whilst upon Midland Metro property. So essentially, they have to retain their ticket on the platform or within any stop, and that allows or takes out the loophole that would allow people to get round and travel effectively without having paid.
Lovely. So that is on page 215. No hands on that recommendation. So that is agreed. Thank you. And then the last of the group is the logic is the penalty fare. So to Ian again.
Thank you. So having agreed the last 2 reports, we then need to look at what would be the appropriate penalty fare to apply should anybody be caught travelling on the metro without paying. I'd like to think nobody would want to be doing that. Anyway, the West Midlands Metro currently operates a penalty fare regime of just £10. So anybody caught will be fined a penalty of £10, and that has to be paid within 21 days. Now, in order for any scheme to work, it's obviously important that the level of the penalty fare is set sufficiently high to act as a deterrent, so we don't encourage people to travel without paying, and whilst not being too high to be viewed as unfair, and that's particularly important should anything end up in the law courts. And the current £10 penalty fare is only going to be roughly 2 times the adult single cash fare once you take into account the extensions of the metro at one end to Wolverhampton Station and at the other end to Edgbaston Village. It's envisaged that the fare for the entire journey would just be £4.50. There is some comparisons then set out in paragraph 2.3 with schemes elsewhere in the country. Unfortunately, it's anticipated that there'd only be a 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 chance of a passenger having their ticket checked on any journey. So again, it's important that we set the penalty fare at an appropriate level, and that is deemed to be at 20 times the single fare, which results in £100 penalty fare. The UK tramway industry has a scheme whereby if you pay your penalty fare early, you get a 50% or roughly 50% discount. So the proposal in this is that we adopt that principle, and that if you pay your penalty fare within 14 days, you'll get a 50% discount. So that'll be £50 rather than £100. Any failure to pay the penalty fare within the 28 days will make anybody liable to prosecution. The maximum penalty, if you're prosecuted, is £1,000. So again, I would commend these recommendations to the board.
And I have one hand, Councillor Mike Bird.
Really relating to the last point, but it's connected. In relation to making sure that it's advertised on the Metro, you must retain your ticket. It's as simple as that, really, because, you know, if it's not displaying, I'm sure it's been picked up, but it was just to make sure that we're all aware that it has to be there, saying if you haven't got your ticket, you're going to get nicked. Simple as that. Thank you.
Yeah, I perhaps should have pointed out, actually, it was remiss of me, that this paper is taking us out to consultation on these proposals.
Okay.
So the outcome of the consultation we fed back to the board. But I think you make a valid point, Mike. It wouldn't be reasonable for us to be charging people penalties unless we've made it absolutely clear to them what the consequences were of not buying a ticket.
Lovely. And on that note, page 237 of the 3 recommendations, including the consultation. I'm not seeing any other hands, so that is agreed as well. Thank you. So for now, that completes the transport proposals. Now then, we've got a slug of committee reports, and I'm hoping we can skittle through these without everyone contributing, because obviously we've got 2 important papers left that we haven't come to yet. So first of all, the Audit and Risk Committee. I may make an exception and ask David if you want to say anything in support of this paper. David Lane? No, not coming in. All right, so that is noted then. And then we come to the Investment Board. Stop me if you need, Councillor Slay, number 19.
Just for noting, Mr. Mayor.
Noting, thank you. Number 20 is the Transport Delivery Committee. Kath, stop me if you wish to. No, OK, thank you. 21 is the said board report, which is in the name of Tim Pyle. Stop me again if you want me to.
Just for noting, thank you.
Thank you very much. 22 is the overview and scrutiny in the name of Councillor Trickett. Anything you want to add? Noting, thank you very much. 23 is the Environment and Energy Board in the name of Councillor Courts.
For reading and noting.
Thank you very much, Jean. 24 is back to you, Lisa, the overview and scrutiny second innings. Also noting.
For noting, sorry.
Thank you very much. 25 is back to you, Bob, the Investment Board.
Likewise for noting, Mr. Mayor.
Lovely. Gosh, number 26. Now, George has had to leave. It's the Skills Advisory Board. But Julie, anything you want to pull out, or is that for noting as well?
Just for noting, Andy.
Thank you very much. And then Kath, back to you.
Yes.
27, the Transport Delivery Committee.
Yes, this was our private meeting where we prepared the report, which you'll be looking at item 32. On
Yeah,
your
jolly good. I understand. Yeah, excellent. And then 28. Now, Maria's not here. So, Ed, anything you wanted to say on this, or is that just for noting?
Just for noting.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I just put my hand up. Could I just trespass on the time just a little bit on this one? There's a report that came to the committee called Punishing Abuse. And this is a wonderful piece of joint work that's been done by the Combined Authority and my office, by Claire Domy from your office and Tom McNeil from mine. It is going to be very important for all local authorities to have a very close look at this report, or get their officers to have a look at it. It's not exactly bedside reading. It's about 50 to 60,000 words long. But I think it's essential now that all authorities actually look at it. What it is actually looking at the research that's done, the extent that childhood adversity, abuse and trauma of children actually then leads them to progress into their adolescent years and adult years into the criminal justice system, with all the effects that has. So it outlines some key proposals for reform of the youth justice system, and it's going to need further discussion, I think, in some detail, with the Combined Authority perhaps sitting with us, the police as well, actually looking at this to see how we can avoid some of the awful things that are happening to many children at the moment, with their trauma converting into the most terrible life chances for them. So thanks to those who've been working on it. But I think over the next year, that all local authorities should be working with the Combined Authority and ourselves in actually looking at how we implement this. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed, do you want to pop in?
Just very simply to say that we are planning a workshop when we launch that in February. So if other people do want to get involved in that conversation, then that would be the first step to do so.
Thank you very much. So that completes all the minutes. Thank you. And we're back now to, sorry, and therefore, I didn't do it properly there. Therefore, we're now at the exclusion of the public and press.